It is really an honor to me to be able to introduce our speaker today, Lottie Beth Hobbs. For you, I imagine everyone in this room is acquainted with some of her writings, or maybe all of them. In Lottie Beth's lifetime, she has had a myriad of accomplishments and honors. I feel like I do know Lottie Beth sort of personally because I've had contact with her several times over the years. But my first contact with her and her writings was when I moved to Oklahoma City in the early 1970s, and they were in the midst of fighting the Equal Rights Amendment. So I became involved in that, and at that time, Lottie Beth was producing Pro Family Forum magazine. In it was a wealth of information that we used. It was information about what was going on around the United States, and information that none of us would have been able to attain except through this magazine. And we used that constantly when we went to talk to legislators and our friends and to ladies groups. And we had other information too. But I'm happy to say we finally convinced the last 5 representatives to vote no, and we did defeat it. And I feel like that I became very close to Lottie Beth from her writings in that magazine. And since then, I have appreciated everything she's done so much more. Then I moved down here, and I was able to meet Lottie Beth. Before, Lottie Beth was just a picture and a title. And I moved down here, and I've been so blessed by meeting her. And those of you who have not met her, please try to. I didn't ask Lottie Beth what I could do about a bio. I thought if I asked her, she'd tell me no. So just like my mother, I didn't ask her. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her as quickly as I can so she can have the rest of the time. Once, she was a church secretary. And of course, she's been a Bible teacher. She has trained Bible teachers. She's a prolific writer, articles, magazines, and books. She also conducts ladies' workshops all over the United States. And recently, Lottie Beth told me and some other ladies that she had quit speaking as often because she wanted to concentrate for a few years on writing. So I think we've been blessed that she's giving us this time. Lottie Beth has written many books. Some of them have had 20 printings. Many of them have been published in foreign languages, and I think the most exciting of all is Daughters of Eve is in Braille. Lottie Beth has received many public honors, and I think one that is very distinctive to me is that she was chosen to be on Ronald Reagan's Commission on Family Policy. Ladies, I would just love to go on and tell you all the things I know about Lottie Beth, because it has made me appreciate everything she says just that much more. But I want her to have all the rest of the time, and I know you will appreciate her like I do. I see a lot of you shaking your heads, anxious. So at this time, I would like to present to you Lottie Beth Hobbs.
Thank you so much, Flavia, and good morning to all of you. And isn't it wonderful that all of us have enough strength and health and the opportunity to be here this morning? It's a great, great day. It's a great day for me. When Maxie told me the theme for this year's lectureship, I was delighted. And I know that all of the lessons that you have heard and from people that are so informed on all of those issues, and that we can have them in a permanent form, will be so good for all of us for years to come. So it's great. It's great that we can be here and this week and do the things and hear the things that have been presented. But it is my firm judgment, and it's up to me to prove this, isn't it, that of all of the isms, the most widespread, the most dangerous, the most destructive, already in the past, the present, and the future, is the one that I have been asked to discuss. And it's, as I said, told some of them a little bit ago, I could talk all day and all night on this subject because it is absolutely so vast. And I have been into this for more than 20 years. I figured up 24 years since I first learned about the destructiveness of this issue that we're talking about this morning. So as I told some of the ladies, I think I'm just going to, for a while, just talk out of my head. I want to tell you, what is humanism? Well, humanism is the greatest deception, that the system of deception that this world has ever known. From beginning to end, it is a system of deception, and that will be established as we go along. It is a system which has actually taken a nation that believed in the supremacy of God and revelation, that believed in revelation, and has taken that nation, and every part of that nation has been, this nation, has been saturated with the idea that authority is not in revelation, authority is in man. Because they reject revelation, and they embrace atheism and man alone. And for that reason, and it is so deceptive, that the reason that it has been so widespread is that it is so deceptive. It's deceptive from the word go. Now I brought one of these for each one of you. I hope I have enough for each one of you. I don't know. But I brought one as a gift for you. It is published by the humanists themselves. Now notice their artwork. Don't you love that? Can you see that? But we had to buy them because it's copyrighted and we couldn't reproduce them. But I wanted you to have, so you can, after this day is over, I want you to go home and take your red pencil, and I want you to go through every word of this and underline in red all of the anti-God, anti-Christian things that they teach and believe. The very title, Humanist Manifesto. Humanism, and one of the men that was the head of the Humanist Association admitted humanism is a polite word for atheism. Well, I would say it certainly is synonymous with atheism, as we shall see all the way through. They admit it. Why is it deceptive? Because they want to teach it to people before they know what they've bought. But I wouldn't say that it is a polite name for atheism, because I don't think it's polite to trick somebody into leaving their faith and embracing atheism. Now, we shall go in a few minutes to some of just the highlights of this, and then I'm going to give you one so that you can take home. We're going in just a moment to mention to you that the father of humanism in the United States was Professor John Dewey, and he is the one that wrote Humanist Manifesto number 1. Now, why did he not call it Atheist Manifesto number 1? The reason is obvious. He knew that if you called it atheist, that a lot of people would be turned away from it. And I have a quote here, if we have time to it, to where one of the most knowledgeable men in our nation has said that humanism is now has pervaded everything in our nation, including the government on down, the state on down. And that is the reason that there is no need for an organized movement on atheism. Madalyn Murray O'Hair is not needed anymore, because these people are doing the very thing that she spent her life trying to do, and they're just doing it in a deceptive way. But I want to go back and share with you how I got into all of this. And I really didn't know when I got into it that it was simply going to absorb me from then on. In 1974, a lady gave me some material that told me and showed me how that the radical women in the United States had started what they call the Women's Liberation Movement. And I thought, well, what's the world's that? Now, I'm a woman. If they're going to liberate women, what are they going to do to me? What are they going to do for me? And I remembered that Castro liberated Cuba. And Cuba's still liberated, isn't it? Okay, so I got to thinking, well, who are these women that propose to speak for me? I'm a woman. And they have a national thing that they are determined that they're going to liberate the women of America. Who are they? I went down to the public library and I said, I want some information on all of this. Well, they showed me where it would be. And I don't know how many were checked out, but there were 8 or 10 books that were not checked out and written by the women that were heading this women's liberation movement. I checked about 4 of them out, and I went home and I started reading. And I want you to know, I got weak in the knees. I got sick at my stomach. These are the women that are proposing to speak for me and my Christian sisters and to take our whole nation into the direction that they envision. Just as a sideline, I want to say they were so gross. They were absolutely so gross. I won't tell you, don't even remember. I've tried to forget everything that's in them, but they were so gross. Barbara's laughing because she knows. And if LaFawn, are you here? LaFawn knows that when her children would come to my house, I hid the books under the bed. And not only did I do that, I went back when the time was up and I checked them out again. Why? Because I was so enamored of them, I wanted to read them again? No. As long as I had them checked out, some sweet young girl somewhere was not reading. And when that time was up, I went down to the library and I checked them out a 3rd time. I think they make a limit for 3rd time. But I got to thinking, where in the world have I been all this time? Have I been asleep while these women have been doing all of these things for and our nation? Well, evidently I had, because I didn't know about them. And then somebody sent me one of these, which is the Humanist Manifestos, number 1 and 2. This is the same thing as this. It's just that this is more expensive. We had to buy it, and we had to buy this one also. But they sent me this. Okay, this tells what the humanists believe. Humanist Manifesto number 1 was written in 1933. Then Humanist Manifesto number 2 was written in 1973. And they're bound together in this book and also in this book. So they tell you what they believe. You don't have to take my word for it. They're proud of it. All right, then at the end of this, there are names of people who have signed and endorsed the Humanist Manifesto number 2. There's names on number 1 also, but mostly the number 2. And among those names is Betty Friedan. Well, now she is the one that I read in the paper that's the mother of the women's liberation movement. So I said, oh, well, this is the answer. This is my answer. This is what the women who propose to speak for the women of America believe. So I studied it and I read it. And it is disturbing. It is nothing in this world except atheism, deceptively pawned off on people from that day till this day. And so I began to try to decide, well, what can I do to fight the women's liberation movement? Another thing that I found out was that they deceptively called themselves, and all women, and women, is feminist. They proposed to be feminist. Well, there again, it's a matter of deception. When you think of the word feminist, what do you think of? Most people in the United States at that time confused it with the word what? Feminine. Now this is where we find out what feminine women stand for and believe in, as you and I had always believed in. And the feminist philosophy is 180 degrees on the other side. But there again, it's a system of deception. And so, Betty Friedan is one of the leaders, was one of the leaders. You read the life of many of the other readers, and if we had time, we could give you many, many quotes. And which Betty Friedan, and here is an article that was written in 1979 in the paper, in which Betty Friedan has proposed to redefine the family. You know that a lot of the problems that we're having right now is because what they do is to confuse the meaning of words. And so she has proposed to redefine family in 1979. How did she define family? Family is people who are living together with deep commitment and with mutual needs and sharing. Therefore, any two people in the world, and you know what that means, living together can be called family and should be recognized as family. This came from Betty Friedan. And then I heard a tape in which Gloria Steinem, speaking in a church, said, by the year 2000, we will, I hope, teach our children to follow the potential movement, not God. Those are the women that are the leaders of the women's liberation movement. Now let me tell you, that has resulted in the fact that for the first time in the history of the world, women have been divided into two different philosophical camps. They're in an entirely different camp from what we are. And never in the history of the world have women so been divided. And women, you believe me, determine the moral stature of the home, the church, and the nation. And when women decide that they're going to lead a nation in a certain direction, it will go in that direction. And therefore I said to myself, and as I said to some of my Christian friends, we have no alternative. We've got to rise up and speak out against this because they do not speak for me. And do you know that some of our older preachers encouraged us and encouraged me, and they said, we who are men cannot speak. We cannot speak out against these things. We will just be branded as male chauvinist pigs. You know that. Women are going to have to lead in this battle. And among those that helped us so much was Brother Chester Hill. And there were others, but he was one of the ones that helped to push us and to encourage us and to help us. So that is the way that I got into this. And incidentally, when we were in Houston, in our organization, how many of you went to the rally in Houston, the pro-family rally in Houston, the largest pro-family rally ever held in the United States? We were in the Astro Arena in Houston, standing room only, 3-hour rally that was just incredible. And when we went to the rally and had the rally planned, it was our organization that planned that and put it together. And the Houston people had the audacity to arrange for me to debate Betty Friedan on the radio the day before that rally. Those of you that were there, you don't know, but I was nearly dead that day. I mean, it nearly killed me. And so I had no alternative. It was a radio debate. We went in there and she was supposed to, she sat here and I sat here and the moderator sat there. And so anyway, I met her. I had that honor and privilege, I want you to know. Okay, we began our little discussion. And somewhere, I don't know what the first point was, but somewhere in the little discussion, I said, well, maybe you can help me. There's something I just don't understand. You are a signer of the Humanist Manifesto, which says we do not believe in a supernatural being. And yet you are on the national board of the Girl Scouts, and a girl cannot even become a scout unless she says she believes in God. She blew up. I mean, she literally blew up. Well, it went on just a little bit. I don't know what else we discussed, but in a minute she says, I don't have to do this. And she got up and walked out, I want you to know. Now, I could go on all day telling you experiences that have happened to me in this, but I want to go into some of the things to help you to understand. I've always been in my Bible teacher, those of you that have been in my Bible class know that I'm very strong on giving you the big picture. I think that we as Bible teachers, we fail if we do not give our children as well as our adults the big picture. People need to know, what does the Bible say from Genesis to Revelation, and where am I? Where is my picture? When somebody shows you a group picture and you know you were there, what's the first thing you look at? Oh, you do? We need to know, where am I in this Bible? And I in Jeremiah, where am I? We need to know that. Now, I want to just give you a part of the big picture this morning, and our time gets away so quickly, so that you can, after this, learn how to recognize some of these things. In the first place, I want to say, what method did they use in order to hoodwink a nation of smart people into accepting an anti-God theory that has absolutely saturated every segment of our society? I mean, every segment. Our government, our schools, our churches, our businesses, our everything. There is nothing that it has not just saturated. The entertainment industry. It's taken over the entertainment industry. Doing what? Espousing these anti-God things. Okay, we must learn how to recognize it. How in the world have they been able to do such a thing? John Dewey, who was, as I said, a professor in Chicago University, and I heard of John Dewey all my life, and I didn't know he was such a, what's the word? Because I, thought he was a great man, great educator. And it wasn't until I got into all of this that he is the man that started all of this. He abandoned his Christian faith, and he went to Europe, and he became enamored with the Renaissance, with the Age of Enlightenment, with the Age of Reason. How many of you have seen the word Renaissance in our news lately? So much for that. And he came back, and he got the help of other professors like Mortimer Adler and Robert Hutchins and others, who they incidentally edited the Encyclopedia Britannica, and they are just as humanist as they are from the core. They are the writers, the editors of the Great Books program. All of those things that have so saturated our nation. Okay, John Dewey came back, and he absolutely became the leader of this system that I am describing to you. That is an anti-God system that has taken over our once God-believing nation. And I'm telling you, it has happened. All right, how has he done it? He reasoned that if you're going to change a nation's values, you need to start with the children. And so he is the one that started the teachers' colleges. Before his day, there was no such thing as a teacher's college. And so he made educators think that in order to be good and way up there in their profession, they needed to come to the teachers' colleges. And so they did. And then there he taught them deceptively his belief that is stated right here. So they began to go back into the schools and to teach the children what they had learned at the teachers' colleges. Most of them innocently. They thought, now this is the latest in education. Now, I'm not saying anything against educators. I've got Christian educators in my family, and I know that not every school teacher is this way, but I'm telling you what John Dewey did. The next thing is that he followed the principle that was found out. He practiced it long before this was discovered. Do you remember that after the Korea, or during the war and after the War of Korea, for the first time in the history of our nation, there were men who defected and went over to North Korea? They weren't forced to. They did so willingly. How in the world did the North Korean people so brainwash them as to get them to leave what we stand for and to go and defect to North Korea? So there was a man by the name of Edward Hunter decided that he was going to try to find out why that had happened. So he did a lot of investigating, and he found out, he wrote a book that was published in 1976. It's called Tactics. And this was his conclusion. This is the essence of psychological warfare. Now listen, this is the essence of psychological warfare. The very thing that Dewey had used prior to that time very effectively. Confuse the meaning of words. Infiltrate varied and conflicting concepts into their usage. And you are able to immobilize a foe by booby-trapping his thought processes. Now you see, that's the essence of propaganda. That is the method that the humanists have used to move a God-fearing people over to a philosophy that does not believe, generally, our nation now has gone from a nation that believed in revelation of God to that which believes that man is God. And that's where we stand. And that's the reason that I say it is so all-pervasive. It is more dangerous today than all of these other isms we're studying this week, although those are very, very vital, and I'm so glad we're getting this information. Now you just think, what is alternative or alternate lifestyle? Okay. What is a meaningful relationship? Okay, you know. What is the right to die? What is a woman's right to her own body? You see, you just change the meaning of words. You infiltrate. Okay, it is not new. It is not new at all. You remember that in Jeremiah, the 5th chapter, verse 20 and verse 21, a familiar verse to you. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, and that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. There could not be a better description in the world than this. Now I must hurry on. I want to just mention some of the things that's in this. We're not going to have time. The time just goes so fast. I just want to mention some of these things to verify, and I want you to take this home, and I want you to read. Just let me flip through some of the things that they say. Not that I say they say, but that they say. Religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. Humanists find the traditional dualism of mind and body has been rejected. We could go on and on and on. Now, in 1973, Paul Kurtz wrote the Humanist Manifesto number 2. Now listen to what he says. This comes from the New York Times. This was a news item when this came out. This second manifesto came out in 1973. Listen to what Paul Kurtz says. The impact of its impact, meaning the first manifesto, was principally within religion, primarily among liberal Protestant denominations. Now, there's a picture also of John Dewey, who passed away in 1952. Now, just a few of the points that you find in Humanist Manifesto number 2. Promises of immortal salvation or fear of eternal damnation are both illusory and harmful. There is no credible evidence that life survives the death of the body. We affirm that moral values derive their source from human experience. Ethics is autonomous and situational, needing no theological sanction. How much have you heard about autonomous? They have buzzwords. Autonomous is one of them. Okay, situation. And of course, B.F. Skinner, if I give you the list of the people that are signers of the Humanist Manifesto, it's all of the major psychologists, the major educators in our nation. But now listen to this. in the area, and there's so much, you can read it for yourself. In the area of sexuality, we believe that intolerant attitudes, often cultivated by orthodox religions and puritanical cultures, unduly repress sexual conduct. The right to birth control, abortion, and divorce should be recognized. Neither do we wish to prohibit by law or social sanction sexual behavior between consenting adults. The many varieties of sexual exploration should not in themselves be considered evil. Now you wonder why that our moral structure has gone down into the pit as it has. Here are people in the highest places of our land that are saying these things. So it's okay. And this is a religion, they say. They know that it's atheism, but they call it all the way through, it is their religion. Is it secular or is it religious? It's whichever one they want it to be. If they want to teach this in the schools, it's secular. They say it's not a religion. It isn't a religion, it's a secular philosophy. And so if they want to teach it in the schools. But if somebody wants to be exempt from the draft on the basis that he is a humanist and that it is his religion, then it can be done because the Supreme Court has so ruled that it is a religion. And so these are just some of the things that are in the Humanist Manifesto. I want to have the time that we have, I want to mention to you, I confine it today as much as we can to those issues that impact upon you, women, the home, and the family. I wish we had a lot of time to go in to what has happened, how it has been used in the field of education. And there again I say, I'm not indicting all educators, but this is just the facts of life. For many years, every teacher was required to have a copy of Values Clarification. I don't know that that's true now. But the men that wrote that, Simon, Howe, and Kirchenbaum, every one of them were humanists, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The purpose was to take a child who had been reared in a religious home, to move that child from his faith to the faith in humanism, to destroy his faith. And I will tell you, it was effective. And so if we could go into what has happened, this involved the children. So our educational system, from the children on up to the highest parts of our universities, the highest structures of our universities, are not considered to be educated until you've gone to some of the universities. And I want to tell you that there's scarcely one left in the nation. There are a few, and even it has tainted even some of our Christian schools, but there's hardly any university that you cannot go to that humanism is not the bedrock philosophy of every class in there. I heard a philosophy professor who is a Christian, who is a professor at Texas University, make this statement. He said, you could go today into every philosophy class in our nation, and you would find that 90% of the discussion would be geared around this point. How can we make an ethical, provide, create, grow an ethical society without God? You see, once you reject God, and then you see all of this evil around you, and you say, well, now what? There's no God, but how are we going to figure out what are we going to do with all of these problems? So he said 90% of the discussion in every philosophy class in the nation, how can we have ethics without God? Well, it cannot be done, but they still keep trying to find out how it is done. So for education from the grammar school, preschool, kindergarten on up is tainted with it, and we as parents, as Christians, must learn how to recognize it and how to help the children to recognize it. But I want to show you also some ways that it has infiltrated the church. Well, first let me tell you, this involves education. When I first got this book, Psychological Seduction, it is written by William Kirk Kilpatrick, who is a man who went to school to become a psychologist. And he almost lost his faith completely because of the humanist teaching that he got in school. And then when he found out what was happening. He backed off and began studying. And he has written one of the most wonderful books that is called Psychological Seduction, The Failure of Modern Psychology. Now, I tell you, we have more preachers, more students in our Christian colleges, in some Christian colleges, trying to learn to be counselors and psychologists than we do to be gospel preachers. Now, it is possible to be a Christian psychologist, but it is rare. It is difficult because everything they teach them in the psychology classes is humanistic, and that means atheistic, man-centered and not God-centered. And after I read this book, and it came out in 1983, and I read it through, and I went to the office where the girls were, ladies were, and I said, if the Lord would grant me one request today, it would be that every preacher, every elder, every leader in the Lord's church would have a copy and read a copy of this book. Because it's one of the most powerful that I have ever seen, to take it and tell how that he, as a person who was a religious man, almost lost his faith through psychology. I wish we had time to go into some of the things that he says in this, but this is another way that it is a combination of religion and education. All of these are so intertwined that they cannot be separated. Education, religion, the home, all of it, the women's liberation movement, all of these things are so intertwined, but all of them are saturated with humanism, which is atheism. Now I want to show you another way that the churches are saturated with it. Here is a book called Values and Faith, Activities for Family and Church Groups. Now this is written by a husband and wife. And the man does not even claim any religious affiliation whatsoever. The woman claims whatever. But actually what it is an effort it takes, and they boast of the fact that they have used the methods of these men in what they are saying. And it is an effort to inject into Bible classes some of the very same principles. Now let me show you. For instance, the method for the humanists, atheists, is always in a Bible class, not what does the Bible say on anything. It's not what does the Bible say. Because it's not God-centered, it's man-centered. And so everything is, what do you think? How do you feel? What would you do? Does that sound familiar to you? Now let me tell you, it has saturated our Bible classes. This is designed for studies not in the Bible classes. I'm not saying, I don't know that this was studied in any of our churches, but I'm telling you that the principle has saturated even the Lord's church. Now listen, and there's so many things. Now, which kind of marriage do you think holds the greatest promise for satisfaction and happiness? Now listen. What do you think? Marriage with a renewable contract, traditional marriage, or open marriage? Now this is for children. Now which do you think holds the greatest promise for satisfaction and happiness? Which do you think? Now let me tell you another one. Another one that was in some of the material that was studied found in one of our churches, and I know that it was borrowed from someone else, but it was asked this to the students: what do you think about instrumental music? Now on everything we should be saying, it's not what I think, it's not what I feel, it's not what would I do. This says, what does God say? What should you think? What should you do? And yet that has almost been lost. It is sad, I'm telling you. This is how the humanist philosophy has saturated our nation. and we must be aware of it. I wanted to show you just another few more of the books. I have in my library scores of books that are pro-humanist, and then I have those that are against the humanist. This one, I'm okay, you're okay. How many of you remember when that came out? Oh, it was just the rage. It was just a thing. And I didn't read it. I scanned it one day at my brother's house. But this man was a humanist out and out. So what is he saying? He is saying, and then the professor here on psychological seduction, he is saying no matter what you do, you're okay. Everybody's okay. And then this professor in the book on psychological seduction says that the gospel of self-esteem has become the, quote, core theme of Christianity. The gospel, not the gospel of Christ, the gospel of self-esteem. Think good of yourself, no matter what you do. Well, where did that come from? This I'm okay, you're okay. And I learned not very long ago, I think this is accurate, that this man committed suicide not so terribly long ago. But the point is, it is anti-God to the core. I'm not okay, I'm not your okay. That's, for instance, this professor in the psychological section says, suppose that you have a girl that is rebellious, does everything that she oughtn't to, and he just lists everything. Are you going to stand up and say to that girl, you're okay, just like you are, you don't need to make any changes? That's what it boils down to. We're not okay no matter what we do. We're okay when we follow the Word of God. And so this is so many of the books. Let me see this one, The Philosophy of Humanism by Carlos Lamont, one of the leaders. This one, Moral Problems in a Contemporary Society by Paul Kurtz, who edited Humanist Manifesto number 2. He's trying to figure out how we can solve all of the problems apart from God. Critiques of God by Sigmund Freud, Erich Fromm, John Dewey, and all of these men. Here is another one, Humanist Ethics. Joseph Fletcher and all of these men whose names, Kai Nielsen, those men whose names have been in the papers for 20 years. They are leaders in this anti-God movement. So there's so much that we need to say on this particular subject. But I know my time is already gone. He said I could have a little bit of time over, but I can't have very much time over. But another thing that we need to understand is how that this has saturated also the entertainment industry. Several years ago, there was a lectureship similar to this down in San Antonio. And our good friend David Miller spoke on humanism in the media. It is an excellent, excellent message. I have it. In which he shows how that the media, the music, the TV, the movies, everything is saturated with these anti-God teachings. And so we must be able to recognize them, to help our children to recognize them. How are you going to do that? It's all around us. We were talking the other night. Have you ever sat down with your children and after you learn all of these things, say, now, we're going to analyze this movie. And it's in the soap operas, it's in the sitcoms, it's in everything you know. It's everywhere. We're going to sit down and everything that we see or everything that they say that we know is against the Word of God, we're going to write it down. Have you ever done that with your children? You won't have to wait very long before you will be using your pencil. I want to make one more point on how powerful these people are, and then I want to end with saying we're going to be the winners. Joyce Taylor, Joyce, hold your hand up. Joyce is here. Joyce was one of our very effective leaders in our pro-family movement the whole time that we had it. And Joyce and her husband, Lloyd, went to Florida and they infiltrated a national meeting of the Humanist Association. And I wish we had time for Joyce to tell you what happened. I wish she had time to tell you how they disguised themselves and infiltrated it. And spent how many days, Joyce? A week?
3 days.
3 days. 3 days. They were there with them, eating with them, talking with them, hearing them, and you ought to hear her describe what all went on. Now, that's the national meeting of the people that are at the head of this stuff. And she said one of the songs that they sang, how often did they sing it, Joyce? But why I remember this, one of the songs that they sang is, "We've got the whole world in our hands." We've got the whole world in our hands. And they do. That's the sad part about it. But light is stronger than darkness. Good is stronger than evil. We are not going to sit down and say, all right, you can have our nation. There's nothing we can do about it. We're helpless. We're not going to do that. We're going to teach our children that the greatest blessing in the world is to have absolutes that they can hold to. One of the most discouraging and terribly nerve-wracking things in the world is to not know anything absolutely for sure. The very best thing in the world is for children to have absolutes that they can hang on. It's a terrible thing to teach them, you're your own boss. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. There is no authority. You don't have to, Mother told me one time her little boy came in from school, and she told the little boy to do something. He said, I don't have to. I'm not going to do that. She said, what did you say? He said, I'm not going to do that. Said, my teacher said that I had the right to do anything I wanted to do, and I don't have to do that. Well, you see, that's participatory democracy that you read about in this, when you get this. The children's rights movement. The children's liberation movement. As a matter of fact, we did a whole thing on IYC, International Year of the Child, Kitty Lib, we called it. I mean, they haven't missed anything. But we're gaining ground. We must gain ground. In spite of everything that is around us, we are going to have to keep on keeping on. And as I said, God is with us, but He's depending on us. God works through people. And it is not Christian, it cannot be that we sit and allow it to go further in our nation without standing up and fighting for the right. Because we have God on our side, we have truth on our side. As I said, light is stronger than darkness. Good is stronger than evil. God's people have always been in the minority. Satan's people have always been in the majority. It's no different. But I will tell you, Satan has had a field day in the last few years. And so we must be aware. We must look at this big picture. We must help our children to understand it, our young people to understand it, our college, university students to understand it. So I know that my time is gone. I didn't bring very many of my books because I didn't know that I was permitted to do so. But please, who can stand at the door? Barbara, can you stand at the door and give the ladies that go out, some that stand at this door and some stand, a copy of the Humanist Manifesto. And also I brought a few of the brochures of my books if you want to order any from me. We have an office and we mail them out every day. And so if you want to do that, I know it's almost time to hear Brother Bert Thompson. And he's one of the great soldiers in the great wars, because one of the foundations of the humanist philosophy is evolution, and all that Bert Thompson has been fighting for all these years. So I have great respect for him, and we're anxious to hear him. Thank you so much. Enjoyed being here, and may God bless you.